All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mr. Feeney, and today we're going to be talking about the evolution of civil rights through the legal process. I put a little subtitle down here, An Ongoing American Struggle, because that's exactly what it has been. It has been a long, long struggle for equal rights in the United States. And oftentimes, those disputes over civil rights have ended up here. These are the current members of the Supreme Court. And we'll be talking a lot about what they have done over the course of American history and how their actions have not always been fair or just. Okay, I'd like everybody to stand up, please. Okay, if you are African American or Hispanic, would you please go to that corner of the room? Okay, and if you are Caucasian, I'd like you all to go over here. Thank you all. Okay. While you're getting situated, let's talk about what you're going to be able to do at the end of this lesson. Okay? As teachers, we have this little phrase we like to use, students will be able to. Well, by the end of the day today, you're going to be able to analyze and explain the key events in court cases and policies in the evolution of the American Civil Rights Movement. And as I've said, there have not always been uniform, happy moments, even coming from the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be the final arbiter of justice in our land. Okay? So, I'm the mayor. Okay? And I've decided that, you know what? Caucasian students, you guys at lunchtime get to use the entire football field. Okay? All that grass out there, it's yours. It's yours alone. You can enjoy your lunch spread out. There's a huge space. Enjoy the grass. Enjoy the sunshine. And, to my students of, African American heritage, of Hispanic American heritage, basically, if you're a person of color, you can really just use that small, little stretch of grass between the main school building and the football field. You're not allowed on their field. Okay? I know, it's a lot smaller. I get it. But you know what? It's grass. Okay? Maybe it's not as nice, but it's grass. Okay? If I proposed that, if I were actually serious about that, would anybody in here find that to be fair? Of course not. Of course not. And you wouldn't find it to be fair because there's absolutely no reason why we would allow for one person to have something when another person couldn't just because of the color of their skin, right? Well, sadly, folks, what I just described to you happened a lot, and at times it was condoned by our American judicial system. Here's a common scene from the civil rights struggle. Okay, colored, white. They had separate. Look at these. These are drinking fountains. Okay, look at how tiny the quote-unquote colored drinking fountain was. Look at how large and how much nicer the quote-unquote white drinking fountain was. Okay. This type of scheme was condoned in the American judicial system for a very long time. We need to kind of go back to the beginning to try to understand what it was about the American judicial system that allowed for this to happen. Okay? If you all, you'll take out your civil rights worksheets, I put them on the desk for you. You're going to see that there are blanks. Okay, where there are blanks, I've added red text here on the screens. Okay, and I want you to go ahead and fill in as we move along today. And that will be very important for the rest of the lesson that, as we move along today. So just go ahead and fill in 1857 and citizen, and then let's talk about it. Okay? Dred Scott, 1857, he's a black slave. Okay? And he sues his owner for freedom because he's often being forced by his owner to continue to work as his slave, even in states in the North where slavery had long since been abolished. Okay? The Supreme Court does not want to get involved. It does not want to issue an anti-slavery ruling. Okay? This was at a time when racial relations in the country were extremely frayed. Okay? You had parts of the country that were so pro-slavery and other parts of the country that hated it. And the Supreme Court basically, to use a football term, they punted. Okay? So they decided that what they would do would be to issue this ruling It's as cowardly as it gets. They said that Mr. Scott could not maintain his lawsuit. They didn't even get to the merits of his lawsuit. They said he couldn't maintain his lawsuit because as the descendant of an African slave, even though he was born in the United States, he could not be considered a citizen. Okay. That holding lasted for a very long time. Okay. And it deprived so many African Americans of the right to the judicial system because they were not considered citizens. And folks, as somebody who practiced law for 10, 11 years, let me tell you this. You don't have to be a citizen in this day and age to maintain a lawsuit, okay? So I've called it cowardice. It was an absolutely cowardly decision by the Supreme Court. Okay? Now, the Supreme Court had an issue, okay? The country had an issue. For those who wanted to keep, people of color in sort of a separate class, they had an issue because people of color, just like the rest of the country during this time, was growing in population. Okay? 1896, this case, Plessy versus Ferguson. Okay, you have Homer Plessy. He's part black, part white, which under the laws of the state of Louisiana at the time, where he was, made him a person of color. And he was, supposed to follow the rules when he took this train trip up to the Chicago area. He was supposed to follow the rules and only sit in the colored section of the train. They actually had a colored train and a white train, kind of analogous to the drinking fountains that I showed you on the screen a moment ago. Okay. So Mr. Plessy buys his ticket, sits in the quote-unquote white car, and when he doesn't get up, he's arrested. Okay. And the Supreme Court said that, yes, his arrest was valid, and yes, it's okay to have a white car and a black car, so long as the facilities are quote-unquote separate but equal. Now, if you saw the drinking fountain, or if you're thinking about the football field versus the little strip of grass, you'll often understand that separate was not equal. Okay. But it was enough for the Supreme Court that there was some other facility, in this case a train car, that African Americans or people of color could sit in to declare it to be quote-unquote equal to where the white people sat. About 50 years later, 1954, Oliver Brown challenges that fundamental premise. His daughter, Linda, she's a third grader, and she has to walk 7 blocks to a bus stop to take a bus for several miles to her African American school, in spite of the fact that there was a school 6 blocks from her house that served all white children. Okay? And she actually had to walk past that school every day on her way to her bus stop. Okay? So her father sues on her behalf. And he basically says, that's unfair. We're Americans. We pay taxes. We're citizens. Okay? We belong here. This time the Supreme Court got it right, 9-0. It said that separate but unequal from Plessy was inherently unequal. Okay? Now, this led to what we have called affirmative action. Okay? Affirmative action is a very short explanation that I can give you in the limited time we have. It's a series of programs developed throughout the 20th century wherein certain people of minority groups, such as African Americans, Hispanics, etc., were given preference in hiring, relaxed admission standards, so on and so forth, in relation to their Caucasian counterparts. Okay? That was sort of the end result of affirmative action. And if you think about it, based on the holding in Brown versus Board of Education, why would that be fair? Okay? Why would that be fair that certain people, because of the color of their skin, are being given preference? It's because you have to understand the purpose of affirmative action. It was to remedy the present-day effects of past discrimination. In other words, because we had a system that discriminated so badly against people of color, that there were times that the educational opportunities that they had been afforded were so substandard that there was absolutely no way, when they were going up for a job or when they were going up for college admission, that they would have these same scores or the same marks And so the whole idea behind affirmative action is to remedy the present-day effects of that past discrimination. Okay. Now, I'm sure you can imagine that there was a backlash. And there were two very important things that happened in California. 1978, Chris Bakke, he sues the University of California because the University of California, in its affirmative action program, was actually setting aside specific numbers of seats. It was 20 seats for African Americans for their medical school. And the Supreme Court said, nah, that goes a little bit too far. Okay? You can't have actual quotas. Okay? But you can use someone's race as a factor in an overall admissions decision. And there was a little bit more backlash in California. Proposition 209 in 1996, California has actually amended their constitution to say, no, no, no. Race, gender, or ethnicity, you can't use that as a factor in employment and admissions decisions. So let's go ahead and move on to our group exercise.